The stagecoach lurched to a stop, throwing Emma forward against the worn leather seat. Dust billowed through the windows, coating her already travel-stained dress with another layer of grit. She pressed a handkerchief to her mouth and peered outside at what was supposed to be her new home. The town of Hollow Creek looked nothing like the letters had promised. The main street stretched before her like a ghost of better days, with boarded windows outnumbering open businesses 3-1. Paint peeled from weathered storefronts, and tumbleweeds gathered against sagging porches. This wasn't the thriving cattle town Thomas Garrett had described in his careful, measured words. Emma clutched her carpet bag and stepped down from the coach, her legs trembling from 3 days of constant travel. She had left Boston with hope burning in her chest, trading the suffocating confines of her sister's charity for the promise of a new life out west. At 26, she had been considered a spinster, too educated and too plain to attract suitable suitors. Thomas's advertisement had seemed like divine intervention. A widower rancher seeking a capable wife, someone to help raise his young son and manage a household. The arrangement was practical, honest, and most importantly, it offered her independence. The station master barely glanced at her as he tossed her trunk onto the dusty ground. She stood there, scanning the sparse crowd for a man matching Thomas's description. Tall, broad-shouldered, dark hair touched with gray. But the minutes stretched on, and the street emptied as people retreated from the midday sun. Emma's throat tightened. Had he changed his mind? Had she traveled all this way only to be abandoned before she even arrived? Then she saw him. A boy, no more than 12, standing beside a battered wagon hitched to 2 tired-looking horses. He wore oversized work clothes that hung on his thin frame, and his dark eyes held a wariness that seemed far too old for his face. He approached her slowly, removing his hat to reveal a shock of unruly brown hair. "You miss Emma Hartwell?" His voice cracked slightly, caught between childhood and something harder. "I am," she replied, relief flooding through her. "You must be James. Your father sent you to fetch me?" The boy's face went pale. He twisted his hat in his hands, his knuckles white against the brim. "PA's dead. Been dead 3 weeks now. Thrown from a horse breaking his neck on the rocks by the south pasture." The world tilted beneath Emma's feet. She reached for the wagon to steady herself, her carefully constructed future crumbling like sand. Dead? But the letters, the arrangement. "The last letter went out before the accident," James said quietly. His voice carried a hollowness that made Emma's heart ache despite her own shock. "I thought about sending word to turn you back, but I couldn't figure out how to get a telegram to a moving stagecoach. And besides..." He looked up at her then, and she saw something desperate swimming in those dark eyes. "We need you, Miss Hartwell. The ranch is dying, the bank's threatening foreclosure, and I can't hold it together alone. PA's brother wants to sell everything and send me back east to some boarding school. But this is my home. This land is all I got left of my parents." Emma stared at this boy who carried the weight of a man's responsibilities on his narrow shoulders. Every sensible part of her screamed to get back on that stagecoach, to return to Boston and the safety of the known world. She had agreed to marry a man, to become a wife and stepmother, not to salvage a failing ranch with a child she barely knew. The practical thing would be to cut her losses now. But as she looked into James's face, she saw her own desperation reflected back at her. They were both orphans in their own way, both fighting against a world that wanted to put them in boxes they didn't fit. She thought of her sister's cramped apartment, the pitying looks from neighbors, the endless days of mending other people's clothes for pennies. At least here, there was land. There was possibility. There was a chance to build something, even if it wasn't what she had imagined. "Show me the ranch," Emma heard herself say. "Let me see what we're dealing with." The relief that washed over James's face was almost painful to witness. He loaded her trunk into the wagon with surprising strength for his size, then helped her up onto the wooden seat. As they rolled out of town, Emma watched Hollow Creek disappear behind them and wondered if she had just made the bravest decision of her life or the most foolish. The only certainty was that there was no turning back now. The ranch appeared on the horizon like a broken promise. The main house sagged in the middle, its roof patched with mismatched boards that wouldn't survive the winter. Fences leaned at dangerous angles, and the barn door hung from a single hinge, creaking mournfully in the wind. Emma's heart sank lower with each detail that came into focus. This wasn't just a struggling ranch. This was a place that had been dying long before Thomas Garrett's accident. James pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the house and sat there for a moment, his jaw clenched tight. "It wasn't always like this," he said quietly. "When Ma was alive, this place was beautiful. She kept flowers in the windows and chickens in the yard. The barn was painted red, and the fences were white. Pa tried to keep it up after she passed, but it was too much for one man. And then he started getting sick. Sick. Emma turned to look at him sharply. The letters never mentioned illness. He wouldn't have told you. Pa was proud that way. James climbed down from the wagon, his movements stiff with exhaustion. Started about 2 years ago. Some days he couldn't get out of bed, couldn't barely breathe. Doctor said his lungs were giving out, probably from all the dust and hard living. That's why he placed the advertisement for a wife. He knew he was running out of time. Emma felt a chill that had nothing to do with the wind. Thomas Garrett hadn't been looking for a companion. He had been looking for someone to take care of his son after he was gone. The realization settled over her like a heavy coat. She had been deceived, and yet, could she truly blame a dying man for trying to secure his child's future? Inside, the house was clean but sparse. Someone had made an effort to tidy up, but years of neglect couldn't be hidden by swept floors and wiped surfaces. The furniture was old but solid, the kind that lasted generations. A large stone fireplace dominated one wall, cold and dark now in the summer heat. Emma could imagine it roaring with warmth in winter, could picture a family gathered around it. But that family was gone now, and she was standing in the ruins of their dreams. "I've been sleeping in PA's room," James said, setting her trunk down in the hallway. "Figured you could have my old room. It's smaller, but it's got a window facing east. Ma always said morning light was the best for waking up hopeful." Emma turned to study the boy more carefully. His clothes were clean but threadbare, patched at the knees and elbows. His face was gaunt, cheekbones pressing sharp against pale skin. "When did you last eat a proper meal, James?" He shrugged, avoiding her eyes. "I've been eating. There's beans in the pantry and some dried meat. I shot a rabbit 3 days back." "That's not what I asked." He finally met her gaze, and she saw defiance there mixed with shame. "I've been managing fine on my own." "I'm sure you have." Emma set down her carpetbag and rolled up her sleeves. "But managing isn't the same as thriving, and we need to be honest with each other if this arrangement is going to work. Now, show me the kitchen, and we'll see what we can put together for supper." The pantry was nearly bare. A few cans of beans, some flour that had seen better days, a small sack of cornmeal, and little else. Emma's throat tightened. This was worse than she had imagined. She stepped outside and surveyed the property with new eyes. The garden was overrun with weeds, but she could see the bones of it beneath the chaos. Tomato plants struggled against their neglect, and she spotted potato leaves in one corner. There was life here, fighting to survive despite everything. "How many cattle do you have left?" she asked when James joined her. 17 head. Used to be over 200, but Pa had to sell most of them to pay debts. "Uncle Robert says they're not enough to keep the ranch going, that we should sell them and the land while we still can." "And what do you say?" James kicked at the dirt, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. "I say this ranch is worth fighting for. My ma's buried on that hill over there, next to my grandparents and my baby sister who died before I was born. PA's there now too. This ground holds my whole family. I can't just walk away because things got hard." Emma felt something crack open inside her chest. She had come here expecting to marry a stranger and step into a ready-made life. Instead, she had found a child clinging to the wreckage of his world with nothing but stubborn hope and raw determination. It would be so easy to give up, to tell him that some things couldn't be saved. But looking at his face, she saw herself at 16, standing beside her parents' graves, being told by relatives that she should be grateful for whatever scraps of charity they offered. "Then we fight," Emma said firmly. "But you need to understand something, James. I'm not your mother, and I'm not going to pretend to be. I'm a woman who traveled 1,000 miles expecting one thing and found something completely different. I'm angry about that, and I'm scared, and I don't know if we can save this place. But I know what it's like to have nowhere else to go. So here's my proposal. We give this 3 months. We work together, we're honest with each other, and we do everything in our power to make this ranch profitable again. If we can't do it, if the bank forecloses or your uncle forces the issue, then we'll face that together and figure out what comes next. But we don't give up without a fight. Agreed?" James stared at her for a long moment, and then, for the first time since she had arrived, a genuine smile crossed his face. It transformed him, made him look like the child he should have been instead of the world-weary adult he had become. "Agreed, Miss Hartwell. If we're going to be partners in this disaster, you should call me Emma." "Yes? I mean, Emma." He stuck out his hand, and she shook it, feeling the calluses on his palm, the strength hidden in those thin arms. As the sun began to set, painting the dying ranch in shades of gold and amber. Emma allowed herself a moment of hope. It was fragile and possibly foolish, but it was there nonetheless. They were two lost souls who had found each other by accident, and together, they might just survive. Emma woke before dawn to the sound of something crashing in the yard. She stumbled out of bed, still half asleep, and rushed to the window. In the grey pre-dawn light, she saw James chasing after a cow that had broken through a section of fence. The boy ran with desperate energy, waving his arms and shouting, but the animal just lumbered farther away toward the open range. She dressed quickly, not bothering with her corset, and flew out the door. "James, stop. You're driving it farther away." He skidded to a halt, breathing hard, frustration and fear etched across his face. "We can't lose her. That's Bessie. She's our best milk cow. Without her, we've got nothing for breakfast, nothing to sell in town." Emma assessed the situation with the practical mind that had kept her employed in Boston's textile mills before her parents died. The cow had stopped about 50 yards away and was contentedly munching on the dry grass. "Get some grain from the barn. Just a handful. And move slowly. We're not chasing her. We're inviting her back." For a moment, she thought James might argue, might insist on his way. But something in her tone must have convinced him because he nodded and jogged to the barn. Emma approached the cow slowly, speaking in low, soothing tones. She had never worked with cattle before, but she understood fear and hunger, and this animal was simply following its instincts toward food and freedom. James returned with a small bucket of grain, and together they coaxed Bessie back toward the house. The cow followed the promise of easy food, and within 10 minutes, she was safely secured in a makeshift pen they created using rope and broken fence posts. "That fence won't hold past breakfast," James said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "I've been meaning to fix it for weeks, but every time I patch one section, another breaks. It's like trying to hold water in a basket." Emma surveyed the fence line as the sun crept over the horizon, revealing the full extent of the damage. "Then we need to prioritize. What absolutely has to be fixed first?" They spent the morning making lists. James knew every inch of the ranch, could catalog every broken thing and every looming disaster. The well was running dry, requiring a new pump. The chicken coop had been raided by coyotes so many times that only 3 hens remained. The roof leaked in the southwest corner of the house. The cattle needed salt licks and proper grazing rotation. The list went on until Emma's head spun with the enormity of it all. "We need money," she said finally. "All of this requires materials we don't have. How much time do we have before the bank forecloses?" James's face went pale. "Uncle Robert said the next payment is due in 6 weeks. Pa missed the last 2 before he died. I've got $40 hidden in the house, money I've been saving from odd jobs. But the payment is $300. It might as well have been 3,000. Emma did the math in her head. Even if they sold every remaining cow, they wouldn't make half that amount. "What about your uncle? Would he loan you the money?" "He'd pay off the bank in a heartbeat, but only if I agreed to let him sell the ranch and send me east. He's not a bad man, Emma. He genuinely thinks it's what's best for me. But he never understood why Pa loved this place so much." Emma paced the yard, her mind racing through possibilities. She had $80 saved from her years of work in Boston, carefully hoarded for emergencies. Combined with James's 40, they had 120. Not nearly enough, but it was a start. "We need to create value quickly. What can this ranch produce in 6 weeks that people will pay for?" James thought for a moment, chewing his lip. "There's wild horses up in the North Canyon. Pa used to catch and break them, sell them to the army or to ranchers looking for workhorses. But I can't do that alone. It's too dangerous. Can you teach me?" He looked at her like she had suggested they sprout wings and fly. "You want to help catch wild horses?" I mean Emma, no disrespect, but you just got here. You've never even ridden a horse, have you?" "No, but I've survived worse than anything this ranch can throw at me. I worked in a textile mill for 6 years, 12 hours a day, breathing cotton dust and dodging machines that could tear your arm off if you weren't careful. I watched friends lose fingers and worse. I'm not afraid of hard work or danger. I'm afraid of giving up without trying." Something shifted in James's expression. He studied her with new eyes, seeing past the city dress and proper manners to the steel underneath. "There's also the garden. If we could get it producing, we could sell vegetables in town. And I know where there's a grove of wild plum trees. We could make preserves, sell them to the general store." "Now you're thinking." Emma felt energy surge through her exhaustion. "We work the garden every morning, tend the cattle, and in the afternoons, you teach me to ride. In 2 weeks, if I'm ready, we go after those horses. Meanwhile, I'll make preserves with any fruit we can find. We sell everything we produce, and we don't spend a penny we don't absolutely have to. They worked through that first day until Emma's hands bled and her back screamed with pain. They cleared the garden, fighting through waist-high weeds to reach the struggling plants beneath. James showed her how to milk Bessie, though the cow seemed highly skeptical of Emma's inexperienced hands. They patched the fence with wire and prayers, knowing it was temporary but necessary. As the sun set on her second day at the ranch, Emma collapsed on the porch steps beside James. Her body ached in places she didn't know could ache. Her hands were covered in blisters despite the work gloves James had found for her. But she felt more alive than she had in years. "You did good today," James said quietly. "Real good. I was worried you'd take one look at all this and run back to that stagecoach. I won't lie and say the thought didn't cross my mind." Emma flexed her sore fingers, examining the damage. "But I've learned something about myself over the years. I'm not very good at giving up, even when I probably should. My sister used to say I was stubborn as a mule with half the sense." James laughed, the sound unexpected and bright in the gathering darkness. "Pa used to say the same thing about Ma. Said it was what made him fall in love with her." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars emerged overhead, brighter than Emma had ever seen them in Boston. The night air was cool and clean, carrying the scent of sage and possibility. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new disasters to manage. But tonight, for this moment, they had survived their first full day together. And sometimes, survival was its own kind of victory. 3 weeks into their partnership, everything fell apart in a single afternoon. Emma was in the garden, harvesting the tomatoes they had coaxed back to life, when she heard the sound of horses approaching. She straightened, shading her eyes against the harsh sunlight, and saw 2 riders coming up the path. One was a well-dressed man in his 40s, sitting tall in his saddle with the confidence of someone who had never known true hardship. The other was younger, harder, with a badge pinned to his vest. James appeared from the barn, his face going white as he recognized them. "Uncle Robert," he said flatly. "Sheriff Morrison." Robert Garrett dismounted with practiced ease and removed his hat, revealing hair the same dark shade as his deceased brother's. But where Thomas had been weathered and worn, Robert looked prosperous and soft. "James. I see the mail-order bride actually showed up. Miss Hartwell, I presume?" Emma wiped her hands on her apron and stepped forward, refusing to be intimidated. "Mr. Garrett. The sheriff. To what do we owe this visit?" "Official business, I'm afraid." Robert's expression held something that might have been genuine regret. "I've been in contact with the bank. They've agreed to accept my offer to pay off the remaining mortgage, but only if I take possession of the property. James, you've done your best, but this ranch is finished. It's time to face reality." "No." James's voice cracked, but his stance was firm. "You've got no right to do this. This is my land now. Pa left it to me." Sheriff Morrison shifted uncomfortably in his saddle. "Son, your uncle is trying to help. He's offering to pay your debts and set you up proper back east. That's more than most orphans get." "I'm not an orphan as long as this ranch stands," James shot back. "And we're going to make that payment. Emma and I have a plan." Robert's gaze swept over the property with undisguised skepticism. "A plan? James, look around you. The fences are held together with wire and hope. You've got 17 cattle when you need 200. The house is falling down, the well is nearly dry, and you're trying to survive on vegetables and wild plums. This isn't a plan. It's a slow death." "We have 3 weeks until the payment is due," Emma interjected, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her throat. "You have no legal right to take this property until that deadline passes and the bank officially forecloses." "Actually, I do." Robert pulled a folded document from his jacket. "I've been appointed James's legal guardian by the territorial court. My brother left no will, no provisions for his son's care beyond the property itself. At 12 years old, James cannot legally hold the title. As his guardian, I have the authority to make decisions in his best interest." The world seemed to tilt beneath Emma's feet. She looked at James and saw his expression crumble, all the careful strength he had maintained dissolving into devastation. "You can't do this," the boy whispered. "You can't just take everything." "I'm not taking anything, James. I'm saving you from a fantasy that will only end in more pain." Robert's tone softened. "Your father was a good man, but he was a dreamer who couldn't accept when something was lost. I won't let you inherit that same stubbornness." There's a school in Philadelphia that will take you. You'll get an education, learn a trade, make something of yourself. This ranch has nothing left to teach you but failure. Emma felt rage building in her chest, hot and fierce. She had known men like Robert Garrett her whole life. Men who spoke of practicality and best interests while stripping away everything that gave life meaning. And what about me, Mr. Garrett? Your brother invited me here under specific promises. I have rights too. You have no legal standing whatsoever, Miss Hartwell. You're not married into this family. You have no claim to the property or to James. I'm sorry you traveled all this way, but sometimes life doesn't work out as planned. He turned to the sheriff. I'll need you to witness the transfer of custody. I want this done properly. Now hold on, Sheriff Morrison said, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. The boy's got 3 weeks to that payment deadline. Seems only fair to let him try. Fair. Robert's voice hardened. What's fair about watching a child work himself to death trying to resurrect something that's already dead? What's fair about letting him cling to false hope? No, Sheriff. We're doing this now, today. James, go pack your things. You can take whatever personal items you want, but the livestock and equipment stay with the property. James looked at Emma, and in his eyes, she saw a plea that broke her heart. But what could she do? She had no legal rights, no claim to anything here. She was just a woman who had made a foolish decision based on letters from a dead man. Then James did something unexpected. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, worn soft from repeated handling. Pa did leave something. He wrote this the night before he died. Mrs. Patterson from town witnessed it and signed it. Robert snatched the paper and read it, his expression darkening with each line. Emma couldn't see the words, but she watched the color drain from Robert's face. This isn't legal, Robert said finally. A dying man's scrawl witnessed by a shopkeeper doesn't constitute a proper will. Actually, in this territory, it does. Sheriff Morrison had dismounted now and was reading over Robert's shoulder. Witness statement of intent, signed and dated. Says here that Thomas Garrett leaves his property to his son James with the stipulation that Emma Hartwell be allowed to remain as the boy's guardian until he reaches his majority. Says if anything happens to prevent the original marriage arrangement, Miss Hartwell is to be considered family with full authority to manage the property on James's behalf. The silence that followed was deafening. Emma's mind raced. Thomas had done this before he died, had somehow found the strength to protect his son one final time. He had given her the authority she needed, the legal standing to fight for James. This changes nothing, Robert insisted. The bank payment is still due, and you still don't have the money. All this does is delay the inevitable for 3 more weeks. Then we'll use those 3 weeks, Emma said, finding her voice again. And Mr. Garrett, I suggest you leave this property now. You're no longer welcome here. Robert stared at her, anger and frustration warring in his expression. But he was a man who understood legal boundaries, and he knew when he was temporarily beaten. 3 weeks, Miss Hartwell. And when you fail, and you will fail, I'll be back to collect my nephew and salvage what I can from this disaster. James, I hope you'll remember that I tried to spare you this heartbreak. They rode away, leaving dust and dread in their wake. Emma and James stood side by side, watching until the riders disappeared over the horizon. Emma? James's voice was small, frightened. Can we really do this? Can we save the ranch? She wanted to lie, to offer him false comfort. But they had promised honesty, and she wouldn't break that now. I don't know. But we're going to try with everything we have. Tomorrow, we start catching those wild horses. It's time to take our biggest risk. The morning they rode out to the North Canyon, Emma's hands shook so badly she could barely hold the reins. 3 weeks of lessons had made her competent enough to stay on a horse, but catching wild mustangs was something else entirely. James rode beside her on his father's old gelding, a rope coiled at his saddle, his young face set with determination that didn't quite hide his fear. Remember what I taught you, he said as they approached the canyon. Stay back and don't make sudden moves. These horses have never been handled. They're fast and smart, and they spook easy. I'll do the roping. You just need to help me drive them into the box canyon where we can corner them. Emma nodded, her mouth too dry to speak. They had spent the last week preparing for this, building a temporary corral, studying the terrain, planning their approach. They had no choice but to succeed. The bank payment was due in 5 days, and despite selling every jar of preserves Emma could make, every vegetable they could spare, and one of their precious cattle, they were still $80 short. The wild horses were magnificent. Emma spotted the herd grazing in a meadow below, about 15 animals ranging from a massive black stallion to several younger horses that couldn't have been more than 2 years old. They were healthy and strong, exactly what ranchers and the army paid premium prices for. "That black stallion is the leader," James whispered. "We get him, the others will follow into the canyon. But he's mean and smart. Pa tried to catch him twice and failed both times." They spent an hour positioning themselves, moving with agonizing slowness to get the right angle. Emma's back ached from the tension, and sweat dripped into her eyes despite the cool morning air. Then James gave the signal, and everything happened at once. The horses exploded into motion the moment they realized they were being herded. Emma kicked her mount forward, yelling and waving her hat as James had taught her, driving the herd toward the narrow canyon entrance. The black stallion tried to break away, but James was ready, cutting him off with expert precision that belied his age. For a moment, Emma saw the man he would become, skilled and confident, a true rancher. Then disaster struck. A young mare stumbled on loose rocks and went down hard. The rest of the herd scattered in panic, and the stallion charged directly at Emma, eyes wild with fury. Her horse reared in terror, and Emma felt herself sliding backward, the ground rushing up to meet her. She hit hard, the impact driving the air from her lungs. Through watering eyes, she saw the stallion bearing down on her, hooves that could crush her skull. She tried to roll away, but her body wouldn't respond fast enough. James appeared from nowhere, screaming and swinging his rope. The stallion veered at the last second, missing Emma by inches. She gasped for breath, tasting blood from where she had bitten her tongue. James was beside her in an instant, helping her to her feet. "Are you hurt? Emma, talk to me." "I'm fine," she managed, though her ribs felt like they were on fire. "Did we lose them?" "Most of them scattered. But look." James pointed to the canyon entrance where 5 horses, including the fallen mare who had recovered, stood trapped inside. "We got 5. It's not the whole herd, but it's something." It took them 2 more days to gentle the horses enough to lead them to town. Emma worked through the pain in her ribs, talking to the animals in low, patient tones while James handled the more physical work. They were a good team, she realized. He had the skills, and she had the determination to push through any obstacle. The horse auction drew a bigger crowd than Emma expected. Word had spread about the orphan boy and the Boston woman trying to save a dying ranch, and people came as much to watch them fail as to buy horses. Emma stood beside James in the town square, both of them cleaned up as best they could manage, and watched as ranchers circled their catch with critical eyes. "That mare's got good lines," one man said. "But she's favoring her left front leg. She stumbled during the catch but she's sound," James replied with confidence Emma wasn't sure he felt. "She'll make an excellent working horse or broodmare." The bidding started slow, but the black stallion drew serious interest. Ranchers recognized quality when they saw it, and despite his wild nature, the horse was clearly valuable. The price climbed higher and higher until Emma's heart pounded with hope. When the auction ended, they had made $243. Combined with what they had already saved, they had enough for the bank payment with $17 left over. Emma nearly wept with relief, but the day wasn't finished yet. Robert Garrett stood at the edge of the crowd, his face unreadable. As the buyers dispersed, he approached them slowly. "You did it," he said, and Emma couldn't tell if he was impressed or disappointed. "I didn't think you could, but you actually pulled it off." "The ranch is ours," James said firmly. "We're staying." Robert was quiet for a long moment, studying his nephew's face. "Your father would be proud of you. Stubborn, reckless, but proud." "I still think you're making a mistake, James. One payment doesn't save a ranch. You'll face the same crisis again and again." "Maybe," Emma interjected. "But now we know we can face it. We know what we're capable of when we work together." "And what happens when the boy grows up and decides he wants something different? What happens when he realizes he sacrificed his childhood to save a piece of land?" James stepped forward, his voice steady and sure. "Then that'll be my choice to make, Uncle Robert. Not yours. I appreciate that you care about me, but this is where I belong. Emma and I are family now, and this ranch is our home." Robert sighed, the fight seeming to drain out of him. "I'll hold you to that. And when you need help, because you will need help, you come to me. Family helps family, even when they're being foolish." He held out his hand to James, who shook it after only a moment's hesitation. That evening, Emma and James stood on the porch of their ranch, watching the sun set over land they had fought to keep. The house still needed repairs, the fences were still makeshift, and 100 problems still waited for solutions. But they had won this battle, had proven they could survive. "Thank you," James said quietly. "For not giving up. For fighting for me when you didn't have to." Emma put her arm around his shoulders, feeling him lean into the embrace. "You fought just as hard. Maybe harder. Your father would be incredibly proud of the man you're becoming." "Think we'll make it? Really make it, I mean?" Emma thought about all the ways they could still fail, all the disasters waiting in the future. But she also thought about what they had accomplished in just 5 weeks, how they had taken something broken and started to rebuild it through sheer will and cooperation. "I think we'll try," she said finally. "And I think that's all anyone can do. We'll take it one day at a time, one challenge at a time. Some days we'll win, and some days we'll lose. But we'll face it together." The stars emerged overhead, the same stars that had watched this land long before they arrived and would watch it long after they were gone. But for now, in this moment, the ranch was theirs. They had earned it with blood and sweat and stubborn hope. And tomorrow, when the sun rose again, they would wake up and continue the work of building a life from the ruins they had inherited. Emma had come west expecting to marry a stranger and step into a ready-made life. Instead, she had found something far more valuable, a purpose, a partnership, and a place where her strength mattered. She had found a son in a boy who needed a mother, and a home in a dying ranch that refused to surrender. As they walked back inside to prepare dinner, Emma realized that sometimes the best things in life were the ones you never planned for, the ones that arrived broken and demanded everything you had to give. The ranch would survive because they refused to let it die. And in fighting for it, they had discovered they were capable of far more than either of them had imagined. The mail-order bride had arrived to marry a stranger and found instead the family she had been searching for all along. And that was worth more than any promise made in a letter could ever be.